Hey, how y'all doing? Today's video I think is going to end up being a two-part video because it's bound to be a little long-winded. I do try and keep them short, but this is a subject that definitely I think needs broached. It's time to talk about, as they commonly refer to in one of the various sayings, is it's time to talk about the elephant in the room that everybody is trying to avoid. Suicide in general in the U.S. is a very taboo subject. Everybody seems to be unwilling to talk about it. It's an unfortunate fact that occurs in human nature, not just our society, but due to the fact of various subsects of that society, especially being the military side, suicide is a lot more prevalent. I mean, 22 people a day. It's over 700 a year. Do the math. It don't take long before that really starts adding up. And honestly, 22 period is too many, not just per day. I firmly believe there's better options. But one of the things that we have to get over as a whole is it shouldn't be a taboo subject. We were taught many times in the military that asking someone if they're considering suicide does not mean that you're going to give them the idea that they should, or that that's an option. Of course, I mean, it's an option. It's not a healthy one. It's not a safe one. It is. I really wish it wasn't an option, but unfortunately for some, if it hasn't already, they're going to think about that on their own. And it's not going to be linked to anything that you've said as far as asking them if they've contemplated it. But there's no getting around it. Even before my life in the military, I was affected by suicide. I had a cousin who committed suicide when I was about, I think I was 11. Literally just shook my family to the floor. And when I mean my family, I don't just mean my parents, brothers and sisters. I mean my entire family, let alone my cousin's family. It had long-lasting effects. And I guarantee you that for basically my entire family on my dad's side, where this cousin was part of, it does not, there's probably rarely a day that it does not cross one of our minds, or all of our minds, that what would be different now? Where would he be in life? What would his kids be like? I mean, quite honestly, I'm quite a bit younger and I have a grandchild, so what would his grandchildren be like? And I guarantee you his immediate family, parents, and siblings also think along those lines. I absolutely guarantee it. In fact, his mother, my aunt, oftentimes when I get the opportunity to visit, which doesn't happen very often, we'll be conversing, talking us through the loud Taft family thing. And if you've never been around one of the Taft family gatherings, it is very loud, it is very boisterous. Personally, I find it quite a bit of fun. People from smaller families and, for lack of better terms, quieter families tend to seem to find it a little disconcerting, but it is what it is. But my aunt will call me Brian by his name. I can't remember if my uncle ever has I don't remember specifically. I think he has, honestly, but either way. And then they sort of get upset, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And I'm just thinking to myself, I know how much you love your child, both of your children. I know exactly how much you love your children. To me, that is one of the best compliments in the world. That some trait, some part of me, granted when you're not angry, which, as most of you know, I do have a tendency to make some people angry. But you're not angry, it's just something reminds me, makes me remind you of him. That's a compliment. I mean, you embody something about someone that they love so much. And I really wish that had possibly crossed his mind prior to committing suicide. Maybe he might have changed his mind. But it has happened. It is what it is. But what I don't think a lot of people who are contemplating suicide realize is how much those actions can and will affect their family, their friends. I don't think it registers. There are those that say that suicide is a selfish act. I prefer not to think that way, because it sort of resorts back to name calling the person, and that is the last thing that anybody in that group needs, is for the name calling, the bickering, this, that, and the other. They need to come together. But I honestly don't believe that the individual contemplating suicide really understands the effect that they, not the act, that they have on their family and friend group. They've lost sight of that, which is completely understandable. Something is weighing on their mind so heavily that they think that this is the only option. There are no other options, which is the furthest thing from the truth, in my opinion. I may be wrong. Once again, I'm not a mental health professional. Various things can or could lead up to a individual contemplating suicide. Oh, big old snake. Good. Go eat mice. But that was my earliest experience in immediate family. Thank God, knock on wood, the only family experience, however, not my only experience in my life. Years later, in the military, shortly after I joined, we had a new technical sergeant, E6, PCS, Permutation Station, move bases in the base that I was assigned at. Very loud, outspoken, vibrant man. Seemed incredibly happy, but unfortunately he had a very troubled past. What all led up to it, if this was a contributing factor, I don't know. But early on in his career, he sustained an injury and ended up having amnesia. Basically, restart the clock. Literally. Had all of the normal functions. Had not like reset the clock, clear back to infant stage, but strictly memory. Knew no one, recognized no one. Man was married, did not recognize his wife. I don't know if he had children at the time of his injury or not, but I mean literally, it didn't know anybody. Nothing. Could not remember anybody. Could not remember how to do his job in the military. Couldn't. And the chief that he worked for at the time figured, well, how are we going to deal with this? Sink or swim, we're going to deploy you. And he talked to the gaming chief for the deployment. This was post-Gulf War, pre-second Gulf War, so it was more of a caretaker status at that point, oversight. Not exactly what I would call an active war zone, or any way, shape, or form, just keeping it from becoming a new one, which it did anyway. But either way, at that time it didn't. But deployed him out to go out, relearn how to do his job. He come in, and this man seemed incredibly happy. Seemed almost like he felt blessed. But as some of us know, there are those that seem to be the happiest, the most outgoing, the most comical. Case in point, Robin Williams, that are dealing with their own demons, that they use that as a coping method, and they essentially, their problems go unnoticed, or barely noticed, or overlooked, or whatever. Ryan and I did not know this man very well. He ended up committing suicide several years later, and just absolutely shocked the heck out of me. This is somebody I know. Holy hell, what the heck's wrong? What happened? And honestly, you'll never really know. I don't think anybody ever will. And that's the unfortunate part of it. And I'm assuming from what little experience I have, thank God, in the subject, his family was shocked, confused, upset, did not know how to deal with the particular subject. I'm assuming there was no warning. I had lost touch with the man. Yes, he was a brother in arms in the military. No, we were not very close, partially due to what is considered an appropriate relationship in the military, me being a young airman, him being a seasoned NCO. But I guarantee you that absolutely shook his family dynamic apart. Hopefully they managed to figure out a way to cope, deal, maintain, and work through this. I don't know though. But the point of these two stories, there's another one. Another individual that I worked with in the military more recently, I knew of him before he joined our squadron. He was a member of a different squadron, and had retired and came over to work as a civilian employee. Two younger sons, I believe, I can't remember their ages. They were in their early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And his one son apparently committed suicide. Possibly the roughest thing for him was the fact that there was no suicide note, there was no nothing. They had to go so far as to try and they got with his cell phone provider to see if they could see what his last phone calls were, his last text messages, to try and piece it all together, to try and make some sense of what exactly happened. And unfortunately, due to the fact of policies, and their son was a legal adult, and the bill provider, they would not provide him with this, would not potentially provide him with this closure that as you can imagine, they very desperately needed. That family seemed to cope with it fairly well, about as best as can be expected, but guaranteed they were affected. I guess the point of all these stories, not necessarily how it affected me personally, how it affected the family dynamic, both so that you can understand as an outsider looking in, be mindful of all this. Don't just push it to the side. Don't ignore it. As a person contemplating suicide, I guarantee you, you do matter. I guarantee you, you will be missed. Your loss will have a dramatic effect on the situation that you're in. It will have a dramatic effect on your family, but it will not help the situation or your family as much as you being there will. Very easy to lose sight of that. I'm going to go ahead and pause.